Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, mailbag time. You guys know the drill. At John Middlekauff is my Instagram. Fire in those DMs. At John Middlekauff, DM, fire in. Start with Danny. Longtime listener, first time DMer. Assuming that Caleb Williams can achieve his potential and become a top 10 quarterback, who do you believe, or what do you believe, is the ceiling and floor for the Bears over the next 3 years? Well, I think there are a couple elements here. If his rookie season goes really, really well, like CJ Stroud, let's say they make the playoffs this year, Eberflus will get an extension. And then you will be tied to him running the operation for the foreseeable future. If he becomes a really good player, but it takes like a year, like this season, he's just kind of, as the kids would say, mid. Eberflus gets fired, and it depends who the next coach is. Now, to me, if they go 8-9 and Eberflus is fired, I think it's fair to assume that they would hire an offensive coach, right? You have this young quarterback. You've invested all this in your offense, that you would want an offensive coach who could also call plays, which would be the ideal setup, I think, in modern-day football. So I think Eberflus is now the question. Caleb is no longer the question. Now, if he becomes really good, regardless who the coach is, you're just going to have a good franchise. I mean, when you have a really good quarterback who plays at a high level, the only way you fail is if your coach is bad. Look at the Chargers, Brandon Staley. They had no shot when Brandon Staley's your head coach. But if you get a high-end quarterback with a good coach, you're good every year. The Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Andy and Mahomes, Josh Allen and McDermott. I'm talking playoffs every year. And playoffs are weird. 1-game scenario, who's healthy, home games, away games. Obviously, in that conference, there's a huge benefit if you're in Chicago. If you're playing at home and you've built a good outdoor team, that, you know, you get the Niners or the Rams that aren't used to that weather, right? But so I think a lot is going to hinge on this specific season for the head coach. They make the playoffs, he gets an extension. They miss the playoffs, I think he's gone. You're not giving him an extension if they miss the playoffs. This isn't like, I'm not anti or pro Eberflus. I think he's been fine. But now we get to really judge him. And fair or not, there is a ton of pressure to make the playoffs, which is a lot to ask. I don't care if you're Caleb Williams, Peyton Manning, or me. Rookie quarterback, NFL, it's hard. With quarterbacks going so high in the draft, how long until the media catches up to front offices and starts ranking even mediocre quarterbacks higher in the draft? Thanks. Keep up the great content. I think in this draft, I think everyone kind of acknowledged all these guys were going to go high, right? I think everyone, Caleb had been the number 1 pick for years. Jayden Daniels after the season was definitely viewed like a top 3 or 4 pick. Drake May was a top 5 pick coming into the season. J.J. McCarthy was a guy that it was clear the Vikings liked a lot. Penix just had a historic season. I thought he was a first rounder. And the connections of Bo Nix, which might have been the only place he would have gone. But Sean Payton were something people had been connecting for 2 months, it felt like. So I actually think for the first time, the vibe on the quarterbacks. Now, we can argue, is JJ talented enough to draft in the top 15? I'm hesitant to draft guys with his skill set in that mix. Because for every Alex Smith we've seen a lot of Kenny Pickett's. We've seen a lot of Mac Jones. It is difficult. It is. And Drake Mays always get drafted in the top 10. Guys that are that big with that much arm talent, even if their film is a little up and down. There's a long history of those guys getting picked high. Penix, a little bit of a late riser given his injury history. and how good he was his, sixth season in college. But I think for the most part, I feel like we'd been talking about quarterbacks going. I mean, a lot of people thought four quarterbacks were going to go 1 through 4. That would have been an NFL record. But four quarterbacks go in the top, whatever, 14, first time in NFL history. John, how long before we see other NFL owners want to see Tepper sell the team? He sent me the visual of David Tepper. I said this on, what would it have been? Friday night, reacting to the second round when I saw the video, like most people going viral. You could argue that it's, he took off the guy's hat in jest, messing around with him. It wasn't even that serious. But I think he has enough incidents now where it's like, bro, you're kind of embarrassing us. Like, this whole thing is, we don't need you here. There's a long line of rich guys that we can kick you out for. Now, they're not going to kick him out, but this is one of those where he's getting a phone call and some owners not being happy. You're allowed to say stupid things as GMs or as owners. Right? Jerry Jones said he went all in. Clearly did not. Jed York said once upon a time that character in terms of players means everything to him. They drafted constantly questionable character guys. You're allowed to say dumb things in press conferences. When you're throwing drinks at fans, when you're going into a small business owner and essentially talking some shit, I don't think it was that big a deal. It's not like he was bullying him to sell his restaurant. It just becomes a bad look. And let's face it, he's a little under the microscope now. And as I've said before, like, he's used to doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And if you get into his way in business, he ruins your life. He can buy your business, put you on the street. Remember the guy, I think there was a famous story of one of his competitors back in the day. He bought his house and then immediately leveled it. I forget the exact details of the story, but he's not used to random people that he does not view as equals being able to call him an idiot. And they don't care what he thinks. And they're right to do that because so far his ownership has been an embarrassment. Doesn't mean it can't change, but it doesn't look like David Tepper is going to change. It doesn't view like he thinks he's been wrong. I can't imagine a lot of people around the league are happy because it becomes kind of an embarrassing thing. Imagine if a player threw a drink on a fan. If a player did that, they'd get crushed. And the team would say something to him. But who is going to say? No one on the Panthers can say anything to David Tepper. So it's the owners and Raj, which I would guarantee you he's already been contacted. Now, ultimately, if you're David Tepper, like, what are you going to do? You going to take away my team? No. You going to reprimand me with a fine? I have unlimited money. So I say the only way to make an impact on Tepper, take away a draft pick. Hurt the team. That'll slow him down. Or maybe it won't. Would you be able to rate the Chargers' overall draft? Love the direction of the new team and Brendan Rice as well. I struggle with this one because, like, the draft grades, I think philosophically, you saw them do Jim Harbaugh things. Offensive tackle, pick 5, which was the most obvious thing. I thought they would take Alt. If they would have taken Latham, would have understood that as well. But taking Alt, like, that's Jim Harbaugh. Why don't you take Mitchell from Texas? Yeah, he doesn't really like playing with those guys. Give me a sweet slot receiver who can get me on 3rd and 6, get me a first down. Because on 1st, 2nd down, I might be running the football. He takes the linebacker from Michigan that he knows really well. That's all I have. I don't have their draft in front of my head. And Brandon Rice, a big physical wide receiver. Not the sexiest guy. A couple years ago, he was playing at Colorado, transferred to USC. Jerry's son. He played with a lot of like Peebles-Jones, Michael Crabtrees, Doug Baldwin's. He does not need sexy wide receivers to win. I like sexy wide receivers. Like some of my favorite players in the NFL. Devontae, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill. Like, those guys are fun to watch. It's not who Jim Harbaugh has on his team. Look at John. Won a lot of games with some random wide receivers. You could argue Zay Flowers is like their first kind of sexy wide receiver in a long time. Didn't he go to the Super Bowl with Anquan? Who was two wide receivers? Anquan, like Torrey Smith. This isn't a mailbag because I've always wanted to do one, but can't come up with a question. But either way, I needed you to see this grade on the first pick from Pete Prisco. I would have taken Jayden Daniels. He gave the Bears an A-. Draft grades, first round, Giants earned A+ for Malik Neighbors. Vikings get C+ for J.J. McCarthy. You guys know where I stand. Draft grades, moronic. There were people that thought Jayden Daniels in 2023, there are people that think he was better than Caleb Williams in 2023. Now, the body of work for 2.5 years, because Caleb played half of his freshman season when they benched Spencer Rattler, it's not even close. But just this year in a vacuum, 100%, you could make the argument Jayden was better. I saw Louis Riddick, who I worked for with the Eagles. He said he liked Jayden more as a player. One thing with Spencer Rattler, he was drafted, I think, in the 5th round by the Saints. Pretty sure it was the Saints. And, it kind of went viral after he was picked. I think Rap Sheet said that he talked to a lot of teams. And every time he talked to the team, the Netflix special came up. And he did a Netflix special when he was in high school. He went to high school here in Arizona. And if you watch that Netflix special, and I did, this is 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was cringe. It was a rough watch. And a lot of people in the league said it was hard to shake that. And I think there are two ways to look at that. One, if you do something as a player when you're young, like, things now are documented. I am very, very fortunate, just like I'm sure many people listening, that camera phones and videos and social media did not exist when I was in high school and college. Very, very lucky. There are a lot of things that they would have gone on there for 99% of my generation, and definitely generations before, there would have been a problem. Well, that's what these guys have to deal with. And when you accept to do a Netflix special and it makes you look bad, like, that's there forever. Now, I'd also say, like, we all look back and say something I did in 2005 when I was 21 years old. I don't even know that person. Hell, it's hard for me to relate to John Middlekauff. I just went third person at 32 years old. At 25 years, you should constantly be changing and getting better and improving as a human. So Shane Beamer at South Carolina, I think, has gone on record and said, like, listen, the guy we've had around, ask his teammates, ask the people in the building, like, people change. I don't think he's that good of a player, but in the 5th round, whatever. The Netflix thing, if Shane Beamer and the South Carolina program's like, I'm telling you, this guy's a lot different. Like, we grow. Sometimes men mature a little slow. Welcome to life. Wouldn't have bothered me that much. But I do understand where people do get a little bothered by it because of the position he plays. If it was wide receiver or safety, no one would have cared. The 82-game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, John, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. For the mailbag, do you think the Chargers did a good job in the draft? I was never in the wide receiver at 5 unless Harrison Jr. was there. I like the corner Cam Hart. He lacks ball instincts, but he's amazing in coverage. He gave up 0 touchdowns this season and is a willing tackler. Getting him in the 5th looks like a steal. I think the key to a lot of players on the 3rd day, what makes or breaks them, is the scheme fit. Like, if you don't run that fast as a corner. Well, if a man-to-man team drafts you, you're going to look terrible. But if you don't run that fast and you have a defensive coordinator that sits in zone defense, Richard Sherman went to Seattle. It was the perfect spot. Zone defender, great tackler, elite ball skills. George Kittle drafted in the 5th round. He went to a team that runs the ball a lot. So what happened immediately? Lined up in the line of scrimmage and blocked. And then from there, because of the scheme, the play action, he's fast. He got a lot of wide open routes and started excelling. I remember talking to George years ago, and he's like, early on, you realize, Kyle, how special of a place this was for me, because when he would call my routes when I was a young player, he'd be like, George, you're going to be wide open after we run these 7 run plays, and everyone bites. And the linebacker won't even see you go by him because he's going to hit the hole so hard thinking it's a run. And George would be like, yeah, it can't be that easy. And then the game would come and I'd be wide open and he's fast and he'd have a 70-yard run, touchdown. Is George Kittle if he goes to a different team? He's obviously an elite talent. Same with Richard Sherman, but the scheme matters a lot for your early success. So offensive lineman, right? If I'm not a powerful guy and I go to a team that is asking me to run like gap schematic, like I need you to push this guy back 4 yards for this to succeed, or you to pull and kick this guy out, it might be a problem. But if I'm not that powerful, but a great athlete, and I'm in a zone running scheme, and I'm not asking you to push the guy backwards, I'm asking you to use your feet and positional block, and then the running back picks the hole after that, much easier for you to succeed. And vice versa. The power guys who don't have the foot quickness can struggle in some of the zone schemes. Now, a lot of teams do it all now, but there's a reason some offensive linemen are better with certain teams and not as good with other teams. And that works at every position. What am I asking you to do? And as a player being drafted, especially on, 5th, 6th, 7th round, I have no control over any of this. That's why as an undrafted free agent, they often say it's better to be an undrafted free agent than a late 7th round pick. Because if I'm a tight end and they're drafting me in the 7th round, if I'm going to a team with an all-pro tight end, a really good backup, and a dude they drafted the previous year in the 4th round, I'm never going to make the team. But if I'm an undrafted free agent, my agent would never let me go to that team. He'd be like, let's sign with this other team that has only one good tight end. He's going to be a free agent after this year. Hell, you have a good training camp, you might be the backup. Obviously, sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Now, big picture, I always think the cream rises and you're going to find a spot with a different team, but it makes the path a little harder. Question for the mailbag. Longtime Panther fan / sufferer. After free agency in the recent draft, what are some realistic expectations for the Panthers this year? And do you think they would move off Bryce if he has another year like last year in regards to they upgraded the weapons? Well, they drafted a running back high, Brooks. They drafted the South Carolina wide receiver. This is off the top of my head. Pick 32, Leggett, who a lot of people like. I think this is a unique case given what they gave up. We just saw this last crop at quarterbacks. Justin Fields was in trouble early on this season. Mac Jones almost got benched in the offseason, right? I think this guy's getting 3 years because of what they traded for him. Now, if his year looks like it looked last year, just like unplayable at times, then I do think in the offseason they would be in the mix to sign, a bridge type quarterback and just quote unquote compete. But I think this is the rare case where even if he's atrocious through 2 seasons, that he's almost getting at least half of the second or the third year. Think of what they traded for him. You could argue right now it's one of the worst trades of all time because you can put players to it. The tackle last year, DJ Moore, Caleb Williams. That alone. Because think about this. You wouldn't trade straight up Caleb Williams for Bryce Young. There's not a soul in the NFL, including the Panthers, that would do that trade. You would not trade DJ Moore straight up for Caleb Williams. And then I'm pretty sure the Bears have a second-round pick next year because of the Panthers. So they've invested so much, you got to give it a little time. And I think this year, I don't know, 6 wins and just look like you're kind of trending in the right direction. I think you're the lock worst team in that division. I mean, the Bucks bring everyone back. They had a good draft. I mean, they're just good. They're solid. They're if Baker's just solid, they should be 9-10 wins again. The Saints were right there this year. If Derek is just better now with Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, they could be 9-10 wins. Who am I missing? Saints, Falcons. Oh, the Falcons. They were right there too for the last couple of weeks. They didn't have a quarterback. Now they got 2. So they easily could be 9-10 wins. Like there's a gap between you and those 3 teams. I think we all acknowledge that. 6-11. Like, would you sign up for 6-11 right now? Because is there a chance you're the worst team in the NFL again? Is your coach any good? Look at his resume. He was a lifetime position coach, 1 year at offensive coordinator, then becomes a head coach. Love the pod. Longtime listener. First time mailbagger. I too live in Arizona. Gilbert. And curious your current thoughts on the local franchise. I'm traditionally a Seahawks Broncos fan, but this year I'm most excited to see how the Cardinals play. I've heard you speak highly of Jonathan Gannon. Given their recent draft, 12 selections. Offseason moves, Jonah Williams, Murphy Bunting, Mack Wilson. Is it feasible to think the Cardinals could finish second in the division? I think there's a pretty wide gap. I think the Niners and Rams are both. One team wins 12-13, the other wins 11. The Rams are very, Stafford, who's been banged up before, if he got hurt, they'd be in a little trouble. They did sign Jimmy Garoppolo, but Jimmy was terrible last year, but he'll be better with the Rams. I think there's a wide gap. Now, I like you more than Seattle because of your quarterback situation. You both have young defensive coaches, but Jonathan Gannon now has a year under his belt. I'd take Kyler over Geno Smith. I don't care what the stats say over the course of the year. I think there's a lot of pressure on Marvin Harrison. I really do. And I think he's a good player. I'm not some Marvin Harrison hater, but this is a text I got from one of the top wide receiver coaches in the league. My question about Rome and Marvin Harrison Jr. is, are they ready to be the guy from day one? This is a text I got. Are they ready to be the best wide receiver in the room starting in OTAs? Because now they get Ramsey the first play of the game. It's different when you're the first rounder, but you're not the best wideout in the room right away. But when you're the best wideout in the room from day one, it's on immediately. Now, obviously, Rome, because he went to the Bears, doesn't have to deal with that. He said if Junior goes to Arizona, he better get his mind right. These dudes ain't on NIL money, watching TikToks all day. You're going against a dude that is 28, 29 years old, 2 kids at home, 3 G-Wagons, and 3 Pro Bowls under his belt. And his point was, Marvin Harrison was his top wide receiver, but it's the mentality. Like, you're showing up and you're playing pro guys who are making $15, $20 million most weeks. And because of the team you're on, that guy's coming at you. And the defensive coordinator, who on any given week could be making $3 to $5 million, is spending all week knowing Kyler's going to want to throw it to you. It is difficult. Like, there aren't Purdue's and Rutgers on the schedule. So Marvin Harrison could go on to be a great player in the NFL. Year one could be kind of tough. It's not like he's Marvin Harrison Jr. along with Larry Fitzgerald, along with Anquan Bolden, along with AJ Green. I mean, they've had some really good wide receivers over the years, but right now it's like Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get a lot of targets. And you know who knows that? The other team. And this is just another level, which this is where Rome really benefits. He's like, I get to be the third wide receiver. If you tell me Rome has 50 catches and 7 touchdowns year one, very believable. I would like Rome less as a rookie if DJ Moore and Keenan Allen weren't on the team. And it was just some other random wide receivers. It's hard because they scheme and they develop the game plan all for you. Well, if we hold you under 5 catches, you got no shot. Now, Trey McBride's a good player. Yeah, I'm interested in Arizona for sure. I think Monty Ossenfort's pretty good. And I think Kyler is kind of a unique head-scratching player, but no one can argue his talent. The pressure on Marvin Harrison starting day one, and a lot has to do with his name. His dad's one of the best players of all time. I saw this clip, I think from ESPN, where they did a sit-down with senior and junior. And Marvin Harrison, the dad, told Marty Smith, he's like, you know the difference in me and my son? He said on Monday, when I had 5 catches for 70. I was the first guy in the room saying, what the fuck is going on? Get me the football, Peyton. Hey, coach, this ain't good enough. They always knew where I stood when I wasn't getting the ball. Give me the rock. So, and then they asked Marvin Jr., have you ever done that? And he kind of laughed. He's like, yeah, it's not really my style. And that's kind of what this coach is talking about. Like, you got to be wired like a nut job in the NFL to be a great player, whether you're a wide receiver, or whether you're a D lineman, or whether you're a quarterback. And part of being a wide receiver, especially with the hype and being the number one guy, is like, you got to demand that pill. Like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, demanding the ball from the moment they step in the huddle. And the pressure when you're the 4th overall pick and you're arguably, I mean, how many players do the Cardinals have that are better than Marvin Harrison Jr.? Probably less than 3. So he's immediately one of the best players, if not the best player on the team. Tough spot. It's easier like Tank Dell. You just kind of get to ease in, then you become a really good player. Saw it with the Niners, like Debo and Ayuk, they kind of got to ease in. And then they kind of there's no easing in for Marvin Harrison Jr. If I tell you right now, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie year is like 48 catches, 4 touchdowns, God, expected a little more. Hey, John, big fan. 17 years old and just started my own podcast. What advice can you give? Just keep doing them, baby. Consistency. The number one key to me is just do it nonstop. Whether that's every day, whether it's every other day. And don't I don't really feel like doing it today. Or, there's nothing to talk about. The only way to get better is to constantly do it. Don't worry early on. You're 17 years old. How many people are listening? Put it on YouTube. Put it on, obviously, podcast feed. Cut it up. Put it on an Instagram feed. Put it on TikTok for all the kids. While TikTok is still legal. LinkedIn. But you got to do it. You can't just we'll do 2 podcasts this week and then no podcast for 2 weeks. If you notice, I do these things every day now. I approach this like a daily radio show. I don't have to do that, but I just do. And I've been doing podcasts now for a decade. And there are days like anyone else, I don't really feel like doing it today. I'm not really that into it. You just got to do it. Okay, last but not least, Raider fan. Big fan. Raiders had a solid draft. Quick question. I was watching all the highlights I could find on Bowers and noticed he was wearing an armband in which he plays just like a quarterback wears. I haven't seen this before. Is this a new thing? That's some good scouting by you. Maybe I don't know. I'd have to ask my friends that went through the SEC what he wears the armband for. Maybe he's like the quarterback, has the play calls on there so they can do special audibles for him. I don't know. I mean, honest to God, I can't answer your question, but that's a great pick. I told Colin the other day, I think 2 teams that would do anything for a redo this offseason would be the Raiders and the Falcons. The Raiders would have given the money they gave to Christian Wilkins to Kirk Cousins, and the Falcons would have given the money they gave to Kirk Cousins to Christian Wilkins. They would have flip-flopped. Michael Penix would be the Falcons quarterback, and Kirk Cousins would be the Raiders quarterback. Because if I told you right now the Raiders had Kirk Cousins, you'd be like, seriously? With all those players? Raiders would be pretty interesting. And if I told you the Falcons, Penix was their starter, Christian Wilkins was out of the defense, my God, it's an interesting team too. Instead, one team's got two quarterbacks. Raiders kind of have none. I know Minshew was solid last year, but I don't think the Raiders can compete in the AFC with Minshew. You could argue the Colts did, but Shane Steichen is an elite play caller. Isn't Luke Getsy your guys' play caller? I like what the Raiders did. I mean, their first two picks were excellent. And they already have some high-end players, but they have no quarterback that I can believe in. And it's not even their fault. Like, what are they supposed to do? They couldn't have taken Bo Nix, and they probably didn't expect the Falcons to take Michael Penix. Because the Falcons don't take Michael Penix, I think Michael Penix ends up on the Raiders. And Brock Bowers is one of my favorite players in the draft. But I think we all agree you would give up Brock Bowers to have Penix, so you have a quarterback. But that's not the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So I don't know why Bowers is wearing that thing, but he's a stud. Now they just got to find a way to get him the ball.